From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
They would have us borrow $700 billion over the next 10 years to give a tax cut of about $100,000 each to folks who are already millionaires.
As President Obama fights to cut the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, we'll speak with Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist David Cay Johnston. Then, will the CIA's extraordinary rendition program ever have its day in court? A federal appeals court dismisses a lawsuit against the CIA's so-called torture flights. Then, using computer chips to track students, privacy advocates are raising concerns about the use of tiny radio devices to help monitor preschool children. We'll host a debate. And the Justice Department announces it will not bring charges against a Philadelphia public school that monitored students by remotely activating the cameras on their laptops. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's fired the opening salvo in a battle with Republicans over the future of tax cuts for the wealthy. Speaking Wednesday in Ohio, Obama called for allowing the Bush-era tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans to expire at the end of the year.
We should not hold middle-class tax cuts hostage any longer. We are ready this week, if they want, to give tax cuts to every American making $250,000 or less. That's 97% of Americans. Now, for any income over this amount, the tax rates would just go back to what they were under President Clinton. This isn't to punish folks who are better off. God bless them. It's because we can't afford the $700 billion price tag.
We'll have more on this story after headlines. The oil giant BP has released the results of a 4-month internal probe of the April 20th explosion that caused the worst offshore oil spill in U.S. history. While admitting partial fault, BP appeared to put more blame on the other companies and contractors that worked on the Macondo well. The report could be a preview of BP's legal strategy should it face criminal charges. Heavy blame is laid on Transocean, the operator of the rig. The report also absolves BP's well design, saying it played no role in the spill. The report doesn't fault any BP officials by name or recommend any punitive action. At least 10 alleged militants have been killed in a pair of U.S. missile strikes in the Pakistani region of North Waziristan. It was at least the 6th U.S. attack inside Pakistan in less than a week. New details have emerged in the case against 12 U.S. soldiers over the killings of unarmed civilians in Afghanistan. 5 of the soldiers are accused of killing 3 Afghan men for sport and then collecting their fingers as trophies. 7 other soldiers are charged with covering up the killings and assaulting a new recruit who helped bring them to light. The Afghans were killed after the soldiers allegedly decided to form a, quote, kill team to carry out deadly attacks. In other news from Afghanistan, the Washington Post is reporting Afghan President Hamid Karzai intends to limit the international role in investigating alleged corruption in his government. Karzai's backed new proposals that would bar U.S. and other foreign officials from direct involvement in 2 anti-corruption task forces within Afghanistan's Interior Ministry. In Mexico, the mayor of a town in the northern Mexico state of San Luis Potosi has been killed in an unarmed attack. Alexander Lopez Garcia was shot dead Wednesday after gunmen stormed his office. He's the 3rd Mexican mayor to be slain in less than a month. In other news from Mexico, 7 people have been arrested for their alleged roles in the massacre of 72 Central and South American migrants last month. The mass slaying near the U.S. border is believed to be the single deadliest attack of Mexico's drug war. The head of Mexico's National Security Council, Alejandro Pare Romero, announced the suspect's capture.
This
arrest will help to completely clarify what happened in San Fernando and means an important step to put an end to impunity in aggressions to migrants committed by organized criminals.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, has said the U.S. is prepared to widen the so-called war on drugs into a planned Colombia-style initiative for Mexico and Central America. Speaking to the Council on Foreign Relations, Clinton also said the drug cartels in Mexico are coming to resemble an insurgency.
These drug cartels are now showing more and more indices of insurgency. You know, all of a sudden car bombs show up, which weren't there before. So it's looking more and more like Colombia looked 20 years ago, where the narco traffickers control, you know, certain parts of the country. The newly inaugurated president of Costa Rica, President Chinchilla, you know, said, we need help, and we need a much more vigorous U.S. presence. So we are working to try to enhance what we have in Central America.
Mexican lawmakers immediately criticized Clinton's remarks. Senator Ricardo Monreal of Mexico's Labor Party said, quote, if the United States thinks it's necessary to apply the same model to us they applied to Colombia, they're mistaken. Clinton's comments come as a new study claims as many as 3 out of 4 guns used in crimes in Mexico originate in U.S. border towns. According to the group Mayors Against Illegal Guns, U.S. government data shows 75% of the guns were purchased in the 4 U.S. states that border Mexico: Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. The actual number could be higher, as the figure only takes into account the guns that were recovered and submitted for tracing. Overall, 19,000 U.S. guns were used between 2006 and 2009. The group's co-chair, New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, says Congress blocked release of the data until March of this year after it was initially requested in 2009. Former Cuban President Fidel Castro has accused Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad of anti-Semitism over his comments on Israel and the Nazi Holocaust. Ahmadinejad has denied the mass killing of Jews in Nazi death camps and has made incendiary remarks that some have interpreted as a threat to Israel's existence. Speaking to The Atlantic magazine, Castro said Ahmadinejad should acknowledge the history of Jewish suffering, saying, quote, there is nothing that compares to the Nazi Holocaust. Castro also echoed the calls of his brother, Cuban President Raul Castro, for reforming Cuba's economic system, saying, quote, the Cuban model doesn't even work for us anymore. In Colombia, a suspect has been arrested in the 2001 killings of 2 union leaders at a mine owned by the Alabama-based coal company Drummond. The suspect, Jaime Blanco Maya, is a brother of Colombia's former inspector general. The victims' families have long maintained Drummond hired the masked gunmen that killed Vamor Lacorno and Victor Arcasito in March of 2001, as well as Gustavo Soler 7 months later. A former senior official at Colombia's Executive Intelligence Agency has claimed the witness, Drummond's top official in Colombia, hand over a suitcase full of money to pay for the assassinations. The Florida-based Christian pastor who wants to burn the Quran on September 11th is vowing to continue with his plan. On Wednesday, Terry Jones of the Dove World Outreach Center said he would proceed despite complaints of bigotry and government warnings that burning the Muslim holy book could endanger U.S. troops.
It is possibly time for us in a new way to actually stand up, confront terrorism. There is something very much wrong with our policies when we stand there and we watch a building full of people die because our so-called policies do not allow us to do anything. So as of right now, we are not convinced that backing down is the right thing. So on September the 11th, we shall continue with our planned event.
A flight attendant for Compass Airlines has been fired from her job after publicly revealing she qualifies for food stamps. The flight attendant, Kirsten Aranejad, had made the disclosure in a television interview as part of a campaign calling for a living wage for airline employees. The Sacramento Bee is reporting BP has played a role in developing the new environmental curriculum for California's public schools. BP employees were part of a state-appointed team responsible for crafting the program's guiding principles. The curriculum will be taught to over 6 million public school students in some 1,000 districts. A new study says some 5 million needy children have missed out on government-funded health care programs despite being eligible. The Urban Institute Health Policy Center says of the 7.3 million uninsured children in 2008, 65% were eligible for Medicaid or Children's Health Insurance Program, known as CHIP. And today marks the 30th anniversary of the anti-nuclear weapons action by a group that came to be known as the Plowshares 8. On September 9, 1980, Plowshares Movement founders Phil Berrigan, Dan Berrigan, Elmer Maas, and 5 others hammered on nuclear warheads at the General Electric plant in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and poured blood over company files. The action has inspired dozens of similar actions at nuclear and military sites worldwide in the ensuing 3 decades. And those are some of the headlines.